Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Marked Out Radio. I'm Sean.
And I'm Dana.
And we have a really, really special guest today. We've talked a little bit over the course of the past couple of months now about, the formation of markedout.com and how really it started with a bunch of fans from Northeast conventions. A lot of us were, going to wrestling conventions, and it was kind of a weird website for people who we would talk online, but then we also kind of would see each other in person, and I don't know. What do you think about how do you think that's a fair characterization of how we started?
Oh yeah, it was this, as we've talked about before. It was this weird thing where like you would know each other and then you'd see each other in person. You'd talk online and see each other, which, considering how much fighting we used to have online, and then you'd see each other a few months later at the show, it was kind of funny. But it
was crazy.
Yeah,
and so the one con that drew us all together was the Legends of the Ring convention in New Jersey. And the one of the promoters, the titans of our hobby, is a guy by the name of Terence Brennan, and we will be doing an interview with Terence right after this break. So if you're shopping for autographs, please check out www.markedoutcollectibles.com or our eBay store at Marked Out Collectibles. To contact us for any reason, please email markedoutcollectibles@gmail.com or join the Marked Out Collectibles official marketplace on Facebook. And all links are in the show notes and on Facebook and Substack. So with that said, we now welcome Terence to the show. Welcome, Terence.
Hello. Thanks for having me. I'm here.
Thanks for coming on.
So I guess let's jump right in. One of the things that is interesting when talking to the people who run cons or do signings is they're in it for a lot of different reasons. So before you got started in this crazy business, did you have a history as a collector before you got into all this?
Sort of, kind of. I started collecting Hasbro's, had the Hasbro figures on the card. I wanted to get each and every one of them. And this started about 1993. And even prior to that, I've been a wrestling fan since 1982, 83, right when USA Network put Southwest Championship Wrestling on. That was my earliest memory of wrestling. And I was a big fan when I was in high school. Me and one of my friends used to go. His dad used to take us. We used to wait outside the arena, follow the guys to the hotels, hang out at the hotels, photo ops, autographs. Nobody did that back then. So an autograph back then was on a piece of the hotel paper, the little pads they give you in the hotel. And that's pretty much what it is. No one got photos signed. No one got figures signed. Nobody got posters signed. It was all photo ops and little scrap paper.
So you were like an OG street grapher, kind of.
Pretty much, yeah. You would say that.
So then,
and later on, I'll actually send you over some of my stuff, pictures of my stuff. It's amazing.
I can't even imagine, because I mean, in that era, you could get, because it's like we were talking about when we first started, and a lot of us, but you started a little bit before we did, but how Dana and I basically started around the same time in like 06, 07, around there, and that that was a great place to start, but that also means we missed out on a lot of guys.
Yeah. The biggest thing everyone missed out was the John Arezzi conventions that are something of legend. They happened like in 1990, 1991. I mean, the legend of those, the people that were there is amazing. And the amount of money they were charging $10 for Ric Flair. Now I'm 18 years old. I thought that was a lot of money. I paid the basic admission at $10. And it was like, I felt like it was a lot of money, but I had no clue. It was the first one I've ever been to. It was like 1990. I had just gotten my driver's license, was at a hotel. It was probably one of those hotels that Big Event ran, because it was right outside of LaGuardia Airport.
Yeah, or someone
probably.
that,
because I remember we went to Shea Stadium for a Mets game after the convention.
I've seen there's lots of occasionally some of the people who are still like on the Facebook groups and who are on the board will post like their memories of those shows, and it's remarkable who was sitting there.
Yeah,
totally unreal.
Woman, Angelo Poffo. I'm the one who debunked the whole Annie Poffo book, that Angelo's the one who signed Macho Man in that book, and that got me a lot of heat too. Everyone's like, well, Annie said it was real. No, I could tell by the signatures. It's not real. No matter who told you it was real, it's not real. Those books were all both signed.
That's crazy. We'll definitely get to that in a sec. So at some point, you went from being a super fan to actually starting promoting at like flea markets and things like that. How did you even get started? Where'd you get the idea to do that?
It was a dream I had, to open up a wrestling store. and I got the idea from some of the other flea markets where they would have like Godzilla or concert videos or music stuff, and everything was like themed. So I'm like, why can't I do that for wrestling? So there was another flea market. It was Route 18 flea market at Route 1. Route 1 was the big one. 18 was going downhill. Route 1 was closing, so everyone was moving over to 18. So that was the time to move over there. So I just started selling like wrestling figures, photos. And then as time went on, people started coming in and selling you stuff, Hasbro figures, LJN figures, magazines. So your stuff just started to get accumulated, and you just started doing it.
So how did that I guess how did you parlay that kind of retail aspect of it into working with talent?
James actually used to come in. The first time I met James was in the flea market. I guess it was around 1994. So we've known each other about 30 years.
Oh, wow.
So he was coming. I was selling ECW videos at that point. So he was buying ECW videos off of me. So we started talking or whatever, and we wound up going to an arena show and wound up meeting up with somebody. We wound up getting Sandman in the store for an autograph signing. He was the first signing we ever did. And this was even before I was really partners with James. I mean, he was partners with me on the Sandman signing, and things kind of like snowballed from there.
So even that, how do you make that first leap into reaching out to a working talent?
James took care of that. We got his number. We asked, it was Sandman. We met him at one of the ECW arena shows. We were talking, and we asked him if he wanted to come out. We got the price from him. He came out, did the autograph signing. It was okay. It was nothing great. It was just getting our feet wet, and it was successful.
It's funny because the guy's still doing the same thing now. Right?
Yeah.
Literally, he's nothing's changed about his life.
No, not at all.
Decades go by and he's still doing the same thing. So I guess at some point you make the decision, working. I guess you did a couple of signings. Was it just the one Sandman signing with James that made you guys launch the idea of Legends of the Ring, or did you do
Legends
a couple?
Of the Ring didn't come until almost 7-8 years after that.
Oh, so you actually done a bunch.
There's a lot. Yeah. There's a lot of other things that happened before Legends of the Ring.
So how do you? Go ahead. How do you snowball?
So we're in the flea market. So we're going around 2005. No, I'm sorry. It was 19. Yeah. So it was a big 10-year, almost a 10-year gap, because we were going around 1995, 1996, when ECW was getting real big, and then right before Austin came in, we did the private signing with Steve Austin up at the Holiday Inn in Newark. That was interesting.
So wait, so you were doing private signings in the 90s. I mean, you have to realize that
we were way ahead of our time.
Way ahead.
Yeah.
So how do you number one, how do you conceptualize something like a private signing with Steve Austin in 95 or 96? And I mean, where do you start printing 8x10s at Staples or something? Like, how do you even, do that?
We had a guy who was printing an actual photo lab. We were getting stuff for our other signings, so we had that under control. That was like the least of our worries, was getting photos. But we would make stuff up when we go up there, kind of like some of the autograph people do today. And I think we did 50 pieces on them, and James straight up asked him. He says, "Do you want to knock out 50 for us?" He set up a price. Austin's like, "No, sure." Was sure he'd do it. But the funny thing was, this was right after he broke his neck with Owen Hart. It was that day after. He must have been broke or something, or just loyal to us, because he still did the signing.
Oh, wow.
Wow. That's wild. So do you remember what you paid him?
It was under 10. I want to say it was $10 an item. Maybe even $5 an item. I don't know.
Sorry. Oh, when you put in perspective, it's incredible, right?
I got a lot more. It's going to get a lot better. Trust me.
So at what point do you hold on to this stuff? Like,
we sold it at the store. We sold it at the store. 25. All right, $25. So
you were
$25 No.
So you weren't even thinking like, all right, I'm going to hold this stuff because this guy is going to be giant. You're thinking of, I want to sell this stuff right away because this is how I'm making my living, basically.
Yeah, definitely. It was stock for the store. We just kept buying stock for the store. James had officially become a partner in the store by now. So we were like official partners, and we were doing the store. We were doing merchandise vendor setups at malls, Freehold Mall. We met the promoters there, and we wound up partnering with the promoters. And then overnight, we're WWF official third-party people who do signings. Like they used to have the pay-per-view blast zones. We were an official signing zone with WWE.
So I want to get to that in 1 second. So like a Steve Austin, was that done through WWE or that was done through some other?
That was done walking up to Steve when he came in at a hotel. James went up to him and asked him. We got Rock that night too. We got stuff signed, full signature Rocky Maivia.
Wow.
And here's a good story. And it just surfaced last week. Somebody had posted in one of the autograph groups a plaque of the Hollywood Blondes. That was a product of that signing.
Yeah, I saw this.
That was sold, ironically, the afternoon that Brian Pillman passed. The guy did not know he had passed. He was eyeing it up, and he come in and he bought it. I swear to God, that next Friday, we opened in the flea market. 10 people were there trying to buy that plaque.
Wow. So, I mean, honestly, this whole thing about becoming an official Blast Zone, now we didn't even have that on the list because I didn't even know about it.
Yeah.
So how does that work? Every
time WWE would come through town, whoever was up in the office handling that, it was Jim Cornette at that point. So it was a company out of Staten Island that used to run all the malls, and we were partners with them on all the WWF signings. They came in their flea market with us, and we did WWE signings in the flea market. And it was just, people would come into the flea market. It would fill the flea market. You know, it was good for everyone involved.
So were you paying WWF a fee?
Yes.
Or how? I imagine those fees were astonishingly low compared to what's going on today.
I'll tell you off air. I don't want to tell you now, but it was crazy.
I imagine people would be dying if they knew of these numbers.
Yeah.
And I guess it was a matter of something where I imagine the talent didn't see a nickel of that either. That was going straight to the office, right?
No, Cornette made sure the guys got their money.
All right. So it was
because he was the one doing it on his own in a way. And then as time went on, it got a little more difficult to do it because there were some people there that were like not giving the fans a good experience, you know, and everything was getting screwed up and they weren't have the proper security and they didn't have the way the lines were running and it made WWF look bad.
Right.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting because I imagine like this is now we're heading into the peak of the Attitude Era here by I imagine this is 96, 97 now. So I imagine that WWF starts growing in popularity. Then the numbers of fans that start being attracted to these things must have started to explode.
And then they finally just they pulled it out from under you. It was getting too big. They started doing it in house.
Like anything else, I guess when the real money starts coming in, then
the little guy gets squashed.
Yeah, then
look, we see that with Fanatics now, right? I mean, that's
exactly
big money is going in. There's millions of dollars here.
It's the equivalent of them of WWE pulling the deal from Fitterman and giving it to Fanatics. It's just there's no different.
Yeah, I mean, it's actually like it's funny because a lot of people look at this is a little bit of a tangent, but a lot of people look at Fitterman as like a big dog, and he's a pimple on the ass compared to Fanatics. You know, when Fanatics has Tom Brady on their roster, you know, so, there's real money going on there. You know,
they're an institution.
So it's actually funny because like I just got an email this morning from WWE.com. They're running like a 30% off sale, and now like some of the Fanatics inventory is starting to get integrated into their website, and you could see how like Fanatics is frantically trying to control the secondary pricing on a lot of this stuff based on what they put on sale and what they don't. It's very interesting.
The funny thing is, at their 30% off, we still beat their prices on a lot of talent.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah,
sure.
I mean, they're really concerned with keeping value, that they're really, really concerned with having a baseline that things do not drop below. And I mean, look, frankly, you see why, because you also see what the behavior of certain vendors who will blow things out and like ruin the market value of certain items. You want to go nuts, you know? So you understand kind of why they do what they do, but it's just like, it's nuts how the values have gone. All right, so you're promoting things, you become a Blast Zone, you got talent coming in. Was the plan to like always continue doing this, or was there like a vision for how to grow this
It
business?
was like a
'Cause, I mean,
day. It was day to day. It was really day to day as to what we were going to do. It was like we'd get like a brain burst, like a brain fart, and it's like, okay, we're going to move forward with this. So
I guess it's
we
hard
wound up.
because yeah. I guess it's hard because at the time you couldn't really predict how big the so not only the hobby but the business was going to get at that time.
It was no internet then either. The internet was in its like infancy. There was no cell phones, there was no smartphones, there was no internet, so it was harder to get the word out too. You had to go all the antique ways, newspaper ads, posters on telephone poles, Tribune show print on the telephone poles. And that was the way you promoted back then. You went to different shows and handed out flyers.
Yeah, I think today a lot of us just take that for granted, like how easy it is. We have, I have a screen filled with apps that I'll promote, X, Y, and Z on. It's like, it's so easy. And back then you were legit, like, it was all paper and physically going places. And yeah.
No, there's a lot. It sounds like there was a lot of pounding the pavement, right, to get this thing going.
Exactly.
And so I guess you guys are doing your thing, and so for about a decade you're doing these. So are there any like major moments where you take a step back and this is just super cool, I love this, or major moments where you want to put your head through the wall and say I really want out?
Well, I did leave for a little while. I did leave and I went out on my own. I was having a lot of personal problems in life. I'm not going to get into it, but it was there. A lot of demons. And I just had to leave the business and I went and did my own thing. I was wholesaling stuff to different people who had mall kiosks, and I was like kind of running them. I had a couple different comic book stores I was doing consignment in. So I was totally out of the actual signings. I was doing merchandise in malls and the wholesaling. So I was out from 98, and then 2002 I started seeing Bud Carson at the shows and wound up doing Mambo's show, and I got the itch back again.
And so while you were out, was James still kind of running?
Yeah, he was doing all the WWE autograph signings. He still had the store, and I had moved to Pennsylvania at this time. I mean, I'll admit it, I was at the bottom of the barrel, like in life. It was bad.
So then you found your way back again.
Yeah.
And so was it kind of you found your way back like after seeing these guys and trying to do signings, or at what point did the concept of Legends of the Ring come about?
That was between me and Bud. I had seen Tommy running shows, Tommy Fierro, and I had seen Mambo running shows. So I took what I saw there and made it like improved. I saw stuff that they were doing that I know that I could do different, and the fans would see it as a improvement. So me and Bud Carson ran the first Legends of the Ring, and it was at a hotel that I was working in a restaurant at. So I got the whole entire hotel for like $200.
So yeah, wow. Basically you just So the first Legends was not you and that was not you and James, that was you and Bud.
Yes, James did not come as an official partner until Legends of the Ring 4.
All right, so let's talk about that first show, I guess. I didn't actually start. I didn't start going to Legends
All you
of the
guys
Ring
came on around 4. That's when we exploded. It was like Legends of the Ring 4, and that's when we really started.
I personally, I don't know what Dana, when you started. I started at 6. So
yeah, we just missed that show with Sherry and.
Okay, you guys didn't do the Sherry show then.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, that was the first one. That was the first one me and James did together.
So I guess when you did your very, very first one, I guess you said there were things that you wanted to do differently from Mambo and from the other guys. Tommy, sorry. What did you do? What was it that you wanted to do differently, and what made you think that you could do it better? Because, like, to be honest, and I like those guys, and those guys ran good shows.
They're great.
Your shows were better. Your shows were bigger. You drew better. You had better guests eventually. You definitely were bigger in terms of your reach. So your ideas worked basically. So what were the ideas kind of that you wanted to do differently than everyone else?
It's all logistics. People don't realize that when they go to these things, they don't want to be confused. Everything needs to be run like clockwork. You go in there. It's like some shows you go to. It's like you're waiting hours for no reason. It's like,
right.
Get people ticketed, I don't care if the doors open at, like, say we open them at 8:30. I'm out there at 8 o'clock trying to get people in line and getting them ticketed. Why not? This way 8:30 comes, they could come right in. So that was one of the things that worked for us, was like, and then trying to organize the different people and the timing and everything else, and kind of like, okay, you've got 2 hours for a signing. How many people can you get through the line? A lot of people don't think about that. They think about the money and everything else. They don't think about the actual logistics to make it a smooth running show. Now, we've always gotten countless compliments from all the talent and the different people working who come in, and they're like, wow, how do you do it? I said, it's not really hard. You just got to organize yourself.
I mean, you say it's not hard, but I would argue that because so many people fail at this, it's pretty hard. Don't sell yourself short. I mean, look at, we went to and obviously the scale is different, but we go to some of these shows and we look at each other and we're like, how is it that 15 years ago Legends figured this stuff out and these guys are still making these mistakes? So I mean, I think what you say is really important.
I view it as common sense. I guess not everyone else does.
It is definitely not. No, I mean I think that's one of those things though. When sometimes when people are successful at a particular thing, you don't always necessarily, it's to you, it's second nature. That's what makes you do it well. To other people, they just don't know. They don't think about it that way. So, so what about let's talk about the super ticket concept, right? Because I had asked Ken about it, and Ken was like, I saw Legends doing it, and it seemed really good, so we did it. And that was like, all right, fine, but that's a pretty novel concept, because when you really think about it,
Mambo did that. Mambo started that, and I mean, I haven't talked to him in, I'd say, maybe a year and a half. Me and him are always very tight. There was never ever any ill will or anything that ever happened between us. He's always been a stand-up guy. Tommy Fierro too. We've always been on the same page and friendly and everything else. There's never been anything. Not one blip between the two of them.
Right. So because I remember back on your board, because you had the Legends board, and I remember I can only imagine what a headache all that must have been. And in some ways, even though I'm sure Marked Out was a little bit of a pain in the neck for you, it also was a relief because you had to get rid of your board, But I remember that you had said, because people were arguing about, or asking for different guests, and you would say things like, this is not a super ticket guest, that's a super ticket guest. And how now, like, we've discussed this, me and Dana, when we drive to all these cons, we discuss like what you must have been, banging your head against the wall trying to explain it to people. But
I can only imagine.
When you thought of like, all right, it was in your head, how did you come up with, what does it mean that a guest is a super ticket guest versus not a super ticket guest?
Okay, it's just like putting a puzzle together. You have a budget. Okay, you're going to sell 100 super tickets at $200 a piece. So that's $20,000. So, okay, you say, okay, how much do you have for talent fees? X amount of dollars. So you kind of like just make a spreadsheet. On one side of the page, all the talent you want to book. And sometimes it'd be 25, 30, 40 names on there, and they might not be used that show, but they remained in the pool of talent I wanted to use in the future. And you'd have your like a main event talent. Like, I've had Roddy Piper on the super ticket. I've had Kurt Angle on the super ticket. And then you go down from there. You have your couple lower level drive-in talents, but everything kind of almost like the way WWE does their Hall of Fame. It's just a certain mix of people you'd put on a super ticket, and it would all just flow together. I mean, there might be a talent that you think they want too much money, but the fans want to see him. So you would put them on there, and you would just adjust the price to a smaller talent. You use another talent down the road.
In a way, I guess in a way, doing it that way allowed you sometimes to, have a little bit of a bigger name and not lose your shirt, because then you could always put King Kong Bundy, on the super ticket or whatever, as an example, or another drive-in to someone who would, kind of round it out like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, all right. So you do your first show with Bud. How'd it go?
It was okay. We had some growing pains there. Everyone showed up except for Captain Lou Albano. Apparently he got lost on the way, and there was no cell phones then. He's trying to call the hotel, and then I'm getting these messages 2 hours later that he's lost. I'm like, it goes back to the time of the technology, the lack of technology then.
Yeah,
But
no
we had
GPS,
an amazing first lineup when you go look back on it. Bruno Sammartino, Bob Backlund, the Wild Simones, Harley Race, and Nick Bockwinkel.
Damn.
I mean, so how'd you draw?
About 150 people.
So in with that number with those guys, is that enough to be profitable, or at least enough to break even? So you go, I want to do this again. Like, how do you?
Here's the honest thing on that. And that each guy signed like 200-300 autographs afterwards. So that's where your money was. So eventually the show wound up being profitable. I sold the rights to the Q&A. So that's how it wound up being profitable. The second one was profitable. The third one was like, because that's the one where everything happened with Sid. And then the fourth one was just like, we opened up the floodgates and didn't have a bad show after that.
So I have to say, you guys were doing things that other people simply were not doing, like selling the rights to a Q&A or even doing extras. I mean, I don't think, from my understanding, because even talking to Ken really didn't think about, he'd do extras a little bit, but in the beginning, when he was doing when he said he was doing his cons at the beginning, he wasn't thinking about extras.
No,
so
we weren't either, really.
Well, when you had them sign a couple hundred extras, right? Was that something that you baked into the deal when you so you were
exactly.
you were that forward thinking even back
That's revolutionary.
Then.
Wow.
It really is, because there is, look, we get into arguments all the time with people who are booking talent today who, like, you figure out when you get there and you figure out, oh man, they didn't even talk about extras with the talent. They were gonna kind of hope to negotiate a quick deal afterwards or some other some other insanity. And so you were baking in these deals then. And so, I mean, would the talent like up their fees significantly when you bake in a couple hundred extras, or did they not even really think about the value of their own stuff?
Back then they didn't. It was these old school guys. They were happy to come out and meet the fans and get this, like, it wasn't a lot of money that they were getting paid either.
But I guess for them, if they weren't working otherwise, it's
they're all retired. I mean, for the money they got, they came in and they were happy with it.
Yeah, it was a nice day's work.
Get the grandkids a gift and move on, basically.
Yeah. And
so I guess for you, it kind of changed with the fourth show. That's when everything kind of blew up.
Yeah.
And then I guess how did sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, we got hit with the death plague. We lost Ernie Ladd from that show and Bad News Brown. We had both of them booked, and both of them had passed away from the time we announced them until the show date.
I remember that.
And we looked at okay, what's their budget? What are they getting paid? And we replaced them with Chris Jericho, who we did a multi date deal for, and was wound up making it work.
I mean, yeah, that was a lot of foresight too, given the time as well, to get because Jericho, I believe he was in between contracts, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So you cleaned up on him then.
That's a hell of a replacement.
Right.
I mean, because there was a time when Jericho was between contracts, but he was a legit draw. So that was a heck of a get. So in that period, were there any guests that stand out to you as like the easiest to work with, or they made a tremendous amount of money, much more money than you expected them to make?
We always did well. We used Sting like 5 times. He was tremendous to work with. Edge was tremendous to work with. We worked with him like 5 times. And I loved working with Piper. Piper was, I think, my favorite guest to work with.
And so those were in terms of working with them and their profitability? Yeah,
I mean, I made sure when I put something together, I look at it more of a break-even point with like maybe a 20% profit on there. So I'm not looking for a high profit. I want to give the fans their money's worth and make a little for myself. But the conventions always have to be run as a business, that you're going to try and make money. You can't go in there where you have no chance to make money. And it's just like, you think you can, but when you look at it realistically, there's no chance in hell that you're making money.
So were there any guests that, I mean, we'll be clear. Were there any guests who you were shocked by how little they drew? You expected someone to draw and make money who just didn't draw or make any money?
Well, I know one of the vendors had Ted DiBiase Jr. right out of his contract, and he did not draw what we thought he was going to draw. He was a
That
good
makes sense though,
example.
because
Yeah.
he was, I mean, very nice guy, but an absolute dud, just in terms of his draw. I mean, he never
He
did anything
didn't have
since
it.
he went to
And I was
jail
a
and
little,
everything.
I'll be honest with you, I was a little disappointed with the Bullet Club. When we booked the Bullet Club, I thought it would be a lot bigger than it was. Granted, we made money on it, but it was like, I thought it was going to be a lot better than it was.
And what year was that again?
It was the full Bullet Club right before AEW opened. So we had the Bucks, we had Cody, we had Brandy, we had Marty, we had Adam Page. So, and I think we were doing different combo packages, and I think it might have confused people because the top package was $200 for an autograph and photo op with everybody. And
That's
I think
funny,
people see
that's
that
a steal right now.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah,
People,
that's like a
even
who's
with
who now.
super
The top
ticket.
of
With the
That's
super
nuts.
ticket, people saw that $200 price point and they got scared. They never took the extra steps to say, okay, you're getting the admission, which is $20 roughly. You're getting 15 photo ops and 15 autographs for $200. You don't have to buy the super ticket to come to the show. You could buy the regular admission and buy your guests one by one. People, for some reason, that had to be one of my biggest pet peeve comments I had to feel is, do you have to buy the super ticket? Well, no, you don't.
Yeah, I think you know what it is though. There's a certain level of, doesn't matter what business you're in, there's a certain level of like complexity that a product can have before the customer's brain just short circuits.
Yeah.
And then they just can't process it. And to you, like, you came up with this thing and it makes sense and it's simple, but they are not even going to give it the energy.
That was one of my problems was I got too sensitive because I'm making it on my own and it's almost like a labor of love. It's like my baby. And I get like personally offended when somebody's going to crap all over something.
Yeah. It's hard because you understand at the end of the day, it's the minute you start taking money from someone that your relationship changes with that person,
Yeah.
And then no matter how much you don't want to get criticism for them, I have this argument with people on Facebook all the time because they want to run like these little businesses, but still kind of be friends with their customers. And it's like, the minute you take money from someone, you have to kind of be less sensitive because there's a certain expectation. Yeah. So I got to ask, this is something that is not on the thing, but I'm reminded because you mentioned the Bullet Club. And what my favorite Legends of the Ring moment personally was when you had the New Japan guys there. You had Liger, Tanahashi, and the Prince Devitt, who became Finn Balor.
Yeah.
And because I remember it was announced like pretty late in the game. I was already committed to going to the show, but I completely lost my mind when these guys were announced, and I came dressed to the show as Jushin Liger, like a total nutcase. And I was like, it was like honestly one of the coolest like mark out moments for me as a fan. How did that happen? Like it was like through New Japan somehow.
Jersey All Pro.
Ah,
that was. I mean, we were tight. We were always on really good terms with Jersey All Pro. And
so
they were great. They were, no, they brought them in. They came in as vendors.
I see. Wow. It was one of those things that I remember at the time thinking like, how is this possible? It can't be real, because it was such a cool thing. But I guess
that was ridiculous.
That was super fun. So that's good for me to know. All right. So, Legends continues on, and then I guess at some point it was around COVID-ish, and my memory is hazy. Dana, yours is better with this kind of stuff.
Hopefully.
But Legends, as the concept of Legends, the super ticket driven Legends came to an end, and then there was I think one additional Legends that occurred without a super ticket. Did I say that right?
We did 3 more when we moved out of because the hotel closed. The hotel, in a matter of 2 years, became so dilapidated. I don't know what happened. It was like mismanagement. The one owner was there, and he got pushed out by his partners, and then the place went downhill.
So, all right. So I guess was it really just a function of the hotel closing that ended Legends as a super ticket show, or was the super ticket concept no longer viable?
We did the super ticket concept one more time. We did it in the new building in Woodbridge. We actually did 2 super tickets. We did a male super ticket and we did a female super ticket.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
And
So what?
it was
So what? I guess what conditions occurred that made the super ticket model no longer viable?
there wasn't enough talent out there. You can get 15 names on a super ticket for that money. You'd have to raise the thing to like $400 to even think about breaking even.
So it's just a matter of the talent costs just ballooned out of control.
The talent, the hotel, the fee for the hotel was astronomical, and just a lot of different little things here and there. You know, the flights after COVID started getting really either really high or really low, and then they would get canceled or they would be late. So it was like you're beating your head against the wall trying to get these people in.
So do you think that the era of the super ticket driven convention is dead?
Yeah, most definitely.
Do you think
like the little guys?
Ken argued that it's theoretically possible. You're saying it's not possible?
I'm not saying it's not possible. I mean, if certain promoters have a good enough rapport with the talent, it could still happen. Like, look at Marty down in Charlotte. He's doing amazing with the super ticket. You know, he's still making it work. But the talent he's using is the old school territorial talent who's not in the game. They're not in the game every single weekend. They're not doing the comic cons where all the money's being made. You know, they might get like one booking at this thing and they go to see friends. I mean, the money they're getting paid, I mean, it's a decent hourly if you want to look at it that way, but it's not like some of these guys are getting for some of these conventions today.
Those guys also though aren't getting any younger, which definitely puts the super ticket concept on an even more like a borrowed time type of thing.
Mm-hmm. And that's the thing. They're getting older. You know, they're dying off. They're getting to the fact where they don't want to travel because post-COVID travel is a nightmare.
Absolutely.
So is that what ended the Legends cons generally? The travel?
It was a lot of different things combined. You know, you got to look at, okay, what we're doing one night a week is the result of one show. I mean, we can do a live sale on our Facebook Live page on a Monday night and generate the same amount of money that we'd be generating on one Legends of the Ring event, if that makes any sense.
Yes, so it sounds like the ROI just wasn't there.
Exactly.
The return was not.
Yeah, return on the investment wasn't there.
Right. It was not commensurate with the amount of money and time and energy you were spending.
Yeah, and that's the truth. You know, you can't say anything else that this one said this one did this. No, that's what it came down to. It came down to the logistics, the amount of making money, and, you know, the hotel tried to raise us again, and we were already paying out the nose for the hotel. So it's like, okay, we're going to take a hiatus, and the hiatus became a year, then it came 2 years, and it's like, realistically, unless we just want to do it to lose money, it's not worth doing.
I guess that's the way to. And when you put it like that, then you realize how many people are doing it, doing, you know, cons and things to lose money, which is a fascinating psychological thing that maybe you can help us understand why people run things to purposely lose money. Because I'm sure that must have been, look, we barely scratched we do nothing compared to what you did. It's not even we arguably not even in the same business at all. You must have been pulling your hair out when you watched people losing money on purpose. That must have been driving, because it drives me crazy, and I shouldn't care as much. What was that like for you? Just watching people losing money on purpose?
I don't know if it was on purpose. I think they actually thought they were going to make money, but if you look at if you crunch the numbers prior, it's impossible.
And so you would see people, and it must have driven you crazy to see people, you know, put out lineups and advertise shows, and, you know, there are certain infamous promoters and vendors we can talk about who you used to joke at the time even that there's zero chance of them making any money. That was something that you would say. I mean, and when people would get mad and they would, you know, then they would call you a sourpuss or whatever. But
yeah,
but you were correct.
Oh, yeah.
Those people never made a dime. They lost.
He was right every
hundreds of thousands of dollars. That's what happened. So, but when you were trying to compete with them, did it not, did that enrage you that these people were like overpaying talent and doing things that were ultimately harming your industry?
Yes and no. Sometimes they'd actually snipe the talent from you. You know, they'd pay them more, or they'd take them from your date or whatever. Or the talent would commit to your date, and then get another offer somewhere else for like triple the money and cancel your date. That I find a little shady, and it happened several times. I don't remember. I mean, I'm not going to mention who it happened with, but that scenaro's happened a bunch of times.
Yes, I mean, what do you? Go ahead, Dana.
I'm saying the problem with that, but like beyond the crappiness of having your date sniped. I mean, then try to reach out to that talent in the future and expect them to take that original price when they just had some Yahoo pay them 3 times what they should be paid.
Yeah, and I think that's the biggest issue today was some of these cons. But with that being said, some of the wrestling talent will go to these cons and make a fortune, more than they could ever make at your small regional wrestling convention, if that makes any sense.
Right, but of course, they have to understand that these cons cannot run every weekend, that there are high-paying events and lower-paying events based on there are house shows and pay-per-views.
Yeah,
right?
Try telling them that. They treat everybody like that sometimes they're beneath them, and it's like a carny business, and they try to work you as a mark, and certain people you can't do that with. Certain people are just too smart to the business to be taken advantage of like that.
So we talked about the guests that were, profitable and unprofitable. We talked about guests who you enjoyed working with. Was there anyone who just, took years off your life with how difficult they were to work with?
Scott Hall.
Let's just dive right in. Let's talk about Scott Hall, because
he's open. He's open territory there.
Yeah, so let's talk about Scott Hall, because I remember actually right after that con that Legends where Scott Hall appeared. One of the fans actually came to Marked Out and kind of told the whole story, and continues to tell that story now on Facebook. I don't want to use his name. I don't know if I don't think he cares, but talked about being, his wife being harassed by Scott Hall at that con. But what was that like? I guess talk us through, because look, not to speak ill of the dead, but it's important that people don't lionize people who behaved badly and treated people very, very badly, and it's important to acknowledge that occurred. So
when he passed, I cringed reading all the stuff about him, because of how he really was to the promoters, how he was, to deal with. It's like Nash, between him and Nash, it's like night and day, both of them.
Yeah, Nash, it can be a little bit prickly about what people charge for his stuff and trying to retain his value now. But other than that, I've heard nothing but that he's actually pretty good to deal with.
He has dry humor, but he's very professional, and I always got along with him.
So I guess talk us through what was it like dealing with Scott Hall?
Well, first of all, it was the ring roast thing, and he was 2 seats to the wind, whether he was on pills or he was drinking or whatever. He was just totally out of sorts, and he started heckling the comedians for no reason. So then the one comedian made the Owen Hart joke, which it was off color, but can you say it was funny? Because anything can be funny, and that's
right.
Just that's
I
what
remember
made him.
At the time, I didn't think, as someone who was in the audience, it didn't register to me as crossing a particular line. It was it was cringy, but it was whatever. It's a roast. That's what they are.
That's what they're supposed to be.
Yeah, they're supposed to be scraping the bottom of the barrel.
Right.
So he went, he picked the guy up by his throat, hold him there for about 6 minutes. It was a shoot. It wasn't part of the show in any way, shape, or form. It happened. Luckily, Kevin Sullivan was there, who was his boss at one time, who was able to take control of the situation. And then we had our security there, which did a good job. And we did our best to de-escalate everything before it went super off the rails. And James was like, do we just send him home and cancel him for tomorrow? I'm like, well, let's take that under advisement. Let's see what happens in the morning, if he's even still here. So they calmed him down. I think they got him back to his room. He showed up the next day, and he just kind of had a chip on his shoulder and an attitude. I handed him his money before he started, and we used to always go to the bank and get crisp $100 bills that were uncirculated. So gave him his pay, and he's like, this is a little light. I says, go in the bathroom and let's count it. He didn't know what to say. So he finished it, but he leave for 20 minutes, and he was a clock watcher, right down to the minute.
Did you ever use him after that one Legends?
Yeah, one more time, 5 years later, just because it got to the point where you were getting desperate, trying to bring viable talent back in.
How was he the second time?
He was a little better, but he was under different management at that point, like a different agent. So the agent handled him a little different. But from what I remember, it was okay. It wasn't great, but it was okay.
Anyone else?
Since he was a clock watcher, how was he with extras? Like, did you try to get extras out of him?
No. I knew right going in there not to get extras. I think we were able to do the mail order because it was in the contract, and it was like 20 pieces of mail order, and he was fine with that. But anything with the extras, I think we got a few. We kind of had a couple of our workers come through with like 1 or 2 photos on their own. Yeah. You got to do what you got to do sometimes.
Absolutely. And if no one has ever booked a talent who's a pain in the neck with extras, they don't know the depths you may have to go to get your stuff.
Yeah.
To get it taken care of. Anyone else besides Scott Hall who was just extremely difficult?
Vader was like douchey to me for some reason. I tried to talk to him. He was another one who was a clock watcher for some reason. And he was like lying about the time he was out there. And he said something nasty to me, and James shut him right up. He says, he's my partner. You don't talk to him like that. And that
was that. Then he was fine after that.
He was okay. He was like all these other guys. They come in, they do the job. They don't remember your face next time you see them.
And would you say that's a certain subset, or is that relatively common?
It's very common. Some of these guys, some of them remember you. When they remember you, it's like, okay, you did something right. But half of them, they don't care. They don't remember you. It's just another payday for them.
It's interesting. You guys had, this is not on here either, but I think it's important to bring up a little bit. So you guys had certain people who brought themselves in, right? Virgil was infamous at these shows. I remember one time people were complaining about Virgil on one of the boards, and I believe it was you, but you said something like, "I wish more talent would be like Mike." As far as how he conducts himself at these shows. Do you want to I know what you mean, but just for the benefit of everyone, just explain what you mean by that.
He contacted us. He come in on his own. He was the best guy to joke around with, God rest his soul. He was really, really a nice guy. But he had that whole folklore to him about the subway and the whole thing with Steve Class with the picture, the infamous picture.
which is real. The picture exists. We've seen it. We've all seen it. So it's a fascinating. I remember my finest Virgil memory occurred at a Legends of the Ring, because Virgil Mike, he understood what his market value was, but he also was a worker. He was a carny, and there was something really funny about experiencing that in the wild, And I remember I had that Jack's Classic Superstars 2-pack of him with Ted DiBiase. And I had DiBiase sign it ages earlier at some indie show. And I was walking around with it. Like, when am I going to pay Virgil? When am I going to finally bite the bullet and get Virgil? And I remember bringing it over to him. And he the thing was, you said that these guys wouldn't recognize you. Virgil recognized all of the fans. He remembered all of us.
Yeah.
So because, he would see us. He would see my face at, the Ken's shows, your shows, George's shows, the various things. So Virgil knew who I was. And so when I finally came over, he made some kind of joke about, "Oh, you're finally coming to see me after being at all these shows." I said, "Yeah, I have this. I'm wondering what you would do for me." And he goes, "Well, what do you think I should?" And I remember being like, "Can you do it for 10?" He's like, "Sure." And so he ended up doing it for $10. And I was like, "All right, fine." And then the guy behind me, literally right behind me, comes up. And he's like, "Oh, Virgil, I was such a big fan. And he's like, "How much is it to take a picture with you?" That's it. Just take a picture with you. And Virgil says, $40. $40. and but my favorite part of that is because I was still getting my stuff together, my suitcases and all the crap I would bring into the shows. And he looks over to me with a glint in his eye and smirks. It was almost like a moment of humor that we understood what he was doing in that moment. And the guy paid him his $40, and he made that guy seem like a king. Doing the various poses and laughing and whatnot, and everyone felt good about that interaction. So I do totally understand what you mean by the fact that Virgil was a good guest at these shows.
Mm-hmm. Sonny was every show. Snooker was every show. Dawn Marie was at every show for a while. Like they're all like within a half hour from there, and they kept coming back because they were making money. They get new photos done up every show, and they'd switch things up a little bit. Howard was at every show, so it was like there was a reason they were coming back.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I remember Sonny was at every again. Sonny, I saw so many times that we used to all make jokes that like we would see Sonny more than we'd see some members of our own family.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And which is really why I know like there are some people who sort of relish and delight in her downfall, but it really makes me very sad because she was a funny person to talk to and be around. You know, I don't know what your experience was with her.
Mainly positive. I tried to keep it positive, but I feel really, really bad for her.
Yeah.
She
had her moments too.
I mean, everyone's like criticizing her and everything, but me and James, especially James went to high school with her. James has known her for years and years and years and years on a different level than anyone else.
Yeah.
So he's able to understand her a little better than just your average person trashing her on Facebook, and myself too. You know, do I think it was shitty? Everything that happened, everything she wound up doing. How do you do this? How do you constantly just repeat the same bad behavior over and over again and not learn from your mistakes? She had 7, 8, 9 times to learn from her mistakes, and look what happened.
You know, but this is what addicts do, unfortunately. So
now we went out. I was out in California with her the weekend Eddie Guerrero passed away. We did a big tour with her. That was a great weekend. That was prior to Legends of the Ring. That was me, James, Mambo were out there in California for a convention. And that's there's a picture floating around WWE.com with Bailey at like 14 years old meeting the Iron Sheik. That was our deal. She met Sonny, and she had asked Sonny about how to get into the business and be a wrestler. And Sonny kind of very discouraged her really bad. So wow. Look at the timeline now and look where everything is now. I was like laughing in my head because she was kind of like really, I felt bad. She was like really nasty to her. And this is a 14-year-old Bailey with her mom. And for some reason, this girl just stuck out to me. And then when I saw the picture of her and Sheik on their website, I'm like, wow, I remember that.
That's wild.
Yeah, that's really a small world.
At the same time, though, again, you understand. You know, I'm not condoning necessarily, but you understand, given all the circumstances around what Sonny had to go through in the business and deal with in the business, you understand why she might discourage a young girl from going into the business. Yeah. You know, mm-hmm. As much as, you know, might look at that as being distasteful, you get it. When you really think about it, it makes sense.
Yeah, she had a different journey than luckily I think Bailey did getting into this business.
Yeah.
I mean, Dawn Marie had her own set of controversies too, which I always found fascinating because I remember all of the accusations that were flying around, and I don't think any of those were resolved publicly. She just kind of disappeared for a while and then recently came back, and then kind of people just don't talk about it anymore. And so I don't really know
it's new people. People don't remember it. And I don't, I'm not going to comment on it because I don't know the facts, but
same.
From what?
Same. Yeah, none of us know the facts, really. Yeah. It was very...
I just know what was reported, publicly what was reported, and she kind of like just disappeared. But I think it was people who were working with her who were the real issue, and we'll leave it at that.
Probably true, because, I mean, she was another one who she didn't have to say anything because I paid her literally one time out of the 100 times I saw her in public, and she always came up, hi, how you doing? Always made an effort to be friendly for no reason except to be a friendly person. So that always like stuck out at me as a thing. Whenever someone has whenever someone has no incentive to be friendly and is still friendly anyway, that always sticks out at me.
She's great. I could say nothing bad about her whatsoever. Dawn Marie, in fact, was at WrestleCon this past year in Philadelphia, and she had come up and she saw me and James. She come up and ran up and gave me a big hug. I hadn't seen her in 10 years. I didn't even know she'd remember me. So I thought that was pretty nice.
Was a people person. Yeah, for cool. Sure. So speaking of niceness and not niceness, one of the way, let's just jump right in. One of the most interesting things, and we touched on it a little bit about working in retail and working with customers and dealing with the public, is dealing with the headaches of complainers and dealing with customer service issues. And so you kind of got a little bit of a reputation as being prickly, I guess.
Yeah. You can say that.
You can have
say that.
a little bit of
I speak my mind, but
very
anyone who's ever paid me gets what they paid for. Anyone who ever does business with me gets what they get.
Right. So how did you, and when you were dealing with, I guess, I can't even imagine like the stress of running a full con, especially when you had like pains in the neck like us on a board, kind of, constantly having comments and opinions about things. It must have been crazy. How do you keep it together, I guess, is the question.
Oh, you saw back then what happened. I'd go crazy. Now things are different. Now it's like I've really, really made a conscious effort to be nice to people, but I slip up. My thing, I tell James now, I says, no profanity, no making fun of people's appearance, no cursing, no like getting into anyone's like personal lives.
It's hard.
You're a deadbeat. You're a deadbeat non-payer. What else? You're a tire kicker. You're a time waster. You can't say anything else. You just got to hit block and just move on with your day.
Right.
It's not worth arguing with anybody because you're going to come up on the losing end of the stick all the time.
Exactly.
You're going to have more aggravation. You're going to have more stress in your life. It's just not worth it anymore.
So basically,
Absolutely.
we've mentioned Marked Out jokingly a few times already. What are some of your, if any, sort of specific memories of the board, maybe fights that you got to on the board, things that happened on the board?
I think the most prolific character was Steve. Class.
So
he was a legend.
316, yeah.
Class 316. He was a legend.
He really was. I guess he still is, at least in his own mind.
So I talked to I had a real quick Facebook conversation with him yesterday. I hadn't talked to him in a while, but it was like 2 words, and that was it.
So you actually at one point, he was banned from your show.
Yeah, we caught him up in the floors at the hotel, like trying to get free stuff, photo ops and autographs, and like not pay for anything. And then he said something real nasty about one of our top showgoers' daughters. And when I heard that, I'm like, you can't come here anymore. And that was it. And then he showed up.
Yeah, that was bad. I remember that.
Yeah. Now, I'm not going to put details that you guys know, but I'm not going to put details there because it doesn't need to be said, but we know what happened.
Yeah.
It's funny because Dana showed me yesterday a video of Steve being escorted out of Legends of the Ring by James. And Steve was wearing a Mil Mascaras mask.
And a trench coat.
And a trench coat.
Don't forget the trench coat.
Trying to sneak in.
How is that going to work?
You want to put money on there if there's anything under the trench coat? With him?
Probably body odor.
You know what's funny though, and I'll take this to the bank because I really mean it. He's a handful. He is a legend in certain ways, but I feel like the cons, because they've become so commercial and so about I hate to say it, everything's about money.
It's all about money now.
Because they've become so commercial that, there was a time, and it's really hard. People who weren't there really can't understand. We all knew each other. We all saw each other. We had like these weird relationships where we were a customer, or we were a vendor, or we were whatever we were, but we would also, needle each other.
You're part of a little family, There
was a weird little family, and Steve was our weird cousin, more or less, and there's a certain fondness, even though he would fight with people and he would do crazy things and he would be really abusive to people. At the same time, there was a weird sort of fondness, a weird sort of affection.
Oh yeah.
For all of that shenanigans, at least on my end, I whenever people would get like, there was always a line that some people didn't understand not to cross, of like being genuinely cruel to someone whose life is a lot worse than theirs. Maybe they don't realize it, And that was always something. That's always an interesting thing in this hobby, And I know that, like, it's something that we have to take into consideration sometimes that we're taking money and that we're making money sometimes off of people whose lives are a lot worse than ours. Does that make sense? You know what I'm saying?
It does make sense. It makes a lot of sense. Or people who are like just different, you know?
Yeah. There's a lot of this hobby, for better or for worse. It attracts a lot of people who are different, who are disabled, who are impoverished. It's an interesting hobby to be in that regard. That if you're trying to make money and do kind of money moves, at the end of the day, I'll never forget that when I was trying to get out, I was trying to sell all my stuff back in like 2012. I had amassed such a collection. I was trying to sell it all, and I found this guy. I can't remember where. I think I found him on Craigslist actually, who wanted to buy all my belts, and I drove to his house. And I'm not exaggerating. He maxed out all of his credit cards buying my belts. And I remember at the same time, on one hand, being like, "Thank God I'm getting rid of these things. I'm making whatever it was, $12,000 or $15,000, whatever the money it was."
Yeah.
And on the other hand, feeling sick, knowing this guy has some kind of. He was living in the basement of his parents' house. He had you could see like he was not in a good place psychologically and socially, and he was willing to spend every nickel and more than every nickel he had on this stuff,
Yeah,
and
you probably
I think,
never recovered from that financially. Not to make you feel bad, Sean, but I mean, you might have ruined his life that day.
And this is an
I don't
interesting
know.
hobby in that regard.
There's people sending money and spending money they don't have. That's pretty obvious because all of a sudden they just disappear. I found that with the vendors too. You'd have vendors, they might do like 2 years and then they like disappear.
Well, it's scary. I mean, I'm sure you've heard stories that you probably don't even want to publicize of how much vendors have lost on different ventures. But even in the short time we were doing this, hearing stories where vendors would tell us, "Oh, I'm paying XYZ dollars for this talent." And Dana and I look at each other and we go, they're going to lose $20,000 on this. There's no way this is making any sense. Like, there's no logical way this is going to, you're going to make money, and you almost feel bad for their family.
Yeah, you're watching like the car crash, like right as it's about to happen, and like they're not going to be receptive to hearing it. So you kind of just got to let them do their thing.
That's another reason why I'm not out there anymore, really, like out and about, because I'd rather sit home and make money. Why am I going to go out somewhere, get a hotel room, go out somewhere 3 days and sit there from set up your vendor table, break it down, worrying about somebody stealing stuff overnight? There's so many different like factors. And at the end of the day, how much do you really make versus what you make on a live on a Monday night? You're making more on that live on Monday night. You're sitting there for a little over an hour on screen showing the stuff, and maybe at the most 2 or 3 more hours packing up all the stuff and following up with the invoices and everything else like that. So it's a better format doing it this way.
The difference is, though, you don't get to sit with these guys and drive around with them and say that they're your close friends and that, you have, you texted so-and-so, like a lot of vendors like to do. They like
that was
to
never
this,
me.
Friendship.
That was never, ever me. That
exactly.
was never, ever me.
Make money.
But you do acknowledge this is a primary driving factor for a lot of these people.
It is. That's why they do it. They just want to. It's almost like going on a vacation. It's like spending $5,000 to go somewhere on vacation. To them, this is a vacation. If they could get a talent and hang out with the talent for $1,000 for 3 hours and like make money or lose money or whatever it is they do, that's what happens. It's been happening forever since I've been in the business, since the mid '90s. This has been happening.
So you think even back then, this is not a new phenomenon, the markish component of this.
Oh, definitely not. Definitely not.
So
you can pay. Back in the day, in the mid '90s, there was promoters that would accept $1,000 to wrestle like a named talent, and then you'd have to bring that talent in, pay for their expenses, and pay the promoter. So these promoters are taking advantage of some of these people who want to play wrestler for the night. The talent's getting paid, the promoter's getting paid, and this guy's fulfilling a life fantasy of working a former WWF talent in a local high school gym.
Wow.
I've seen that happen a lot. I've seen that happen a lot too.
That's crazy.
And do you just kind of laugh it off at this point because you've seen it all? Like,
it's part of the business. You got to laugh. You can't do anything else but laugh.
Oh man, that I did not I did not know that was the thing. It makes me kind of sad. But I guess look, people are frantic sometimes to be separated from their money, right?
I guess like baseball, they have like the baseball fantasy camps and stuff. I guess it seems a lot like worse than that, but I guess it's sort of there's mainstream alternatives to this that are similar.
Yeah. And so here we are when we're making fun of psycho fans and all that. Do you have any particular stories about working with? I mean, you worked with basically all the legends: Warrior, Hogan, Flair, Sting, Bruno, Piper, pretty much all of them. How was it working with the big names?
It was a little different than working with some of the smaller names because obviously, with the Warrior Rider and Hogan was easy. Hogan, we dealt with. James knows his representation for years, so he put that together, on his own with Hogan's representation. That was really smooth. Hogan went really smooth. It was 100 items signed up front, and he did 2 autograph signings actually for us because the first one sold out so quickly that in the afternoon I said, well, we'll add another one. So we added another one, and both of them sold out.
Gotta love a sellout.
Yeah.
And Hogan was easy. What was Warrior? What was Warrior like?
Warrior's easy, but Warrior was Warrior. Warrior there was a way to work with Warrior. If you worked with Warrior a certain way, you were golden. He loved us because we knew, like we spoke earlier in the conversation, somebody who actually knows what they're doing logistically and knows how to make everything come together and all the moving pieces move it the same way. And I think he respected that.
He appreciated that. He was a logistics guy.
Yeah. He was like he was kind of quiet, but at the same time he was very nice.
What about go ahead. Sorry, keep going.
No, that's all right. You can keep going.
What about like a Flair?
Flair was through an agent, so the agent was there the whole time. So when the agent's there, it kind of like gives a different perspective to the signing. You got to kind of like go through the agent for everything. The talent's just kind of sitting there signing. So Flair's agent was there at the time, some lady from some agency in Atlanta. And,
so it was more like he just came in, signed this stuff, and left, and there was no real.
Yeah, he had 100 pieces to sign on the side, and then whatever the mail order was, and then he did for the people, and it was fine. It worked out.
So back then, guys like Hogan and Flair and Warrior, they didn't like doing extras was relatively painless. Even Warrior would do extras painlessly.
Yeah, but it was put into the contract, so you were kind of paying for it,
right? But I'm sure not at the rate that
No,
Of course, now that makes sense because even now, what's so interesting was what Hogan is doing now, because Hogan is acting as his own retailer. It's a really hard to get a good rate. Even when you present them with a bunch of pieces, they're much less. There's no less of motivation, I guess, for them to do it.
Well, he's apparently doing real well. He's doing real well with the privates. The guy who's running his shop down there is keeping him busy doing all the privates and stuff. He's doing well with it.
Well, every time they run, because every time they do, every time they announce their wholesale rates, they keep going up and people keep paying them. I'm actually unsure. Knowing what I know about how much certain, I'm going to level with you. I know how much certain, vendors today recently paid wholesale rate to Hogan. I don't know how they're going to make any money on it. I just truly don't know.
Over $100 on wholesale.
Yeah, there's some of them paying $100 or more on wholesale.
That's crazy.
It's insane. And there's so much out there.
Tiered pricing is still a thing unless you go like super, super deep, as I'm sure you know. It's very, very difficult. It's impossible to really.
There are guys bringing him 30, 40 grand. He's still charging them different prices for things. Mm-hmm. I mean, you're not making any money on that. How much is the Hogan 8x10 going to go for? $80? Where's the money?
Yeah, that's all they sell for. That's all they sell for. I mean, I have a ton of beautiful Hogans in our collection, and I don't like we paid the old price on them, but this was well after we had them for a signing. But I have tons of pops. I have signed turnbuckles. I have real nice 16x20 prints. They're all inscribed. I have probably some 11x14s left. I mean, we did them like 2 years ago, maybe little like a little over 2 years ago now, but we still have a decent amount of stuff left on them.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that it's very interesting because when the talent start acting as their own retailers, or when their representation act as their own retailers, they're really, really careful about not allowing things to dip below a certain price.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what we're seeing for certain talents now. I mean, obviously Warrior's gone. Flair with Fitterman tries to protect, even though that if you do enough on Flair, they'll give you whatever. And Sting, I think Sting is looser now than he was, because for a minute Sting really tightened up hard on extras. He was good with you guys.
He was bad on extras.
That was his. Oh, he's fine with us, but that's his representation now. That's who's controlling that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess that's an interesting thing though, is that now so many wrestlers have representation, whereas in the past it was only a select few, right?
Yeah, it was like that upper tier.
Mm-hmm.
Have you noticed a difference in how they, like, when you try and do privates and when you try and do signings and things like that? Do you notice a difference as far as how they behave now that they have representation?
I haven't done anything in 2 years, a year and a half rather. So I really tough person to ask on that. I haven't been around too many people in the last 2 years. But,
so right now, the stock that you sell is just stuff that you have from previous signings.
Yeah, from over the years. I mean, I don't participate in personally, but James and a couple other people will fly down to Florida to graph usually every 2 months or so and come back in with new stuff.
And so are you still part of that kind of operation peripherally?
Yeah. I just don't go. That's all. I don't go down there.
It's a way to do it.
Best arrangement ever. Yeah.
I would say that's a phenomenal arrangement, honestly. Just put in for it and then they'll go. I love that. Did you ever? So let's get real, because we've heard conflicting reports on this. Did you ever attempt Randy Savage, and if so, how close did you get?
Actually, we did. It was when he resurfaced with Mattel, and he started to do the stuff with the Mattel action figures. Very, very preliminary, and then he passed.
Wow.
He passed in February, and I think it was like October, November. We were trying to get him for June, and he had passed that February, I believe, or whenever he passed. I don't remember the timeline on it, but I remember it was very shortly after he popped up again on with the Mattel deal that we started putting the wheels in motion, but it never went anywhere.
Was that something that his people were receptive to doing at all? Like, that was a thing that you thought might have been actually possible?
Anything's possible, but yeah, with everything going on, we had just I don't remember the timeline. I think we had already used Warrior, but it was like, in our eyes, if we were able to successfully work with Warrior, why not work with Savage?
Oh yeah.
But wasn't the issue before that he simply wouldn't reply to requests?
I think that's what it was. He even tried to go through Lanny. Lanny would shoot it right down. He didn't want any part of it.
Right. So it wasn't even the money. It was just that he just wouldn't want to do it.
Yeah.
So that's it. It's interesting sometimes to think about what might have been.
Oh yeah, it's
in that regard.
Very frustrating, because I mean I know we sort of had that same feeling from the outside, complete outside at that point, as fans and collectors, that it just felt like at that point with his resurfacing that, it was more realistic and possible than ever before. And then hearing this, I think there was definitely a chance.
If he would have lived, he would have been out. I can almost guarantee that.
That's even more frustrating to hear. So thanks.
Yeah.
I'm actually depressed.
What about, we mentioned Ring Roast a little bit. Let's talk about it. Where'd the idea for Ring Roast come from? It was kind of a little bit of an idea that was ahead of its time. So where'd that come from?
That was Sean Oliver and Kayfabe Commentaries came up with that. They presented us with the idea. It was originally supposed to be promoted on Howard Stern with the Killers of Comedy. All those guys who were appearing regularly on Howard Stern. We had them all booked.
Yep. And
it was going to be something huge. And Howard's people wound up pulling a lot of the comics. So we wound up having to use different comedians from a different source. So that kind of I don't even know if it was ever announced to the public that we were using the Howard Stern people. And my mind is very,
I never heard of it.
That was Beetlejuice and Reverend Bob Levy and What's his name? Florentine.
Yeah, Jim Florentine. Because you
Jim Florentine.
I feel like you also had didn't you have Don Jameson?
Don Jameson, and Don Jameson was there, and he blew up. He went on to become something after that.
Yep, he was. It's funny. I got a photo at the show with him. He didn't charge me anything, but I remember that he was just starting to go on Stern regularly.
Yeah,
and then he got that podcast, that metal podcast that kind of blew up a little bit. Because it was before podcasts were huge.
Yeah, that metal show, I think it was called VH1. That metal show. Yeah.
Yep. And so you did the first one. The first one was with Sheik, right?
Yeah.
And how did it go? Do you consider it a success?
That one was a success. That was definitely a success. That one.
What's it like? Because I do have a little bit of knowledge of this. What was it like working with someone like Sheik, especially in an environment like that?
I've known Sheik since 1986. He was one of the first wrestlers I've ever met. Real quick story. I was living with my mom in Florida. It was like 1986, 1987. It was like right after WrestleMania 2. And my dad drove me to the airport. I was probably 12 years old. And we're in the ticketing line. I look up and there's Sheik standing next to me, in front of me rather. So I was a little kid. I'm inside my carry-on bag. I had a Sheik action figure and a Hogan action figure. I pulled it out and I showed it to him, and I was talking to him, and he was just really cool. Couldn't understand him or what he said, and he signed my book, my wrestling magazine I had with me, and it was just, I'll never forget it to this day.
That's awesome.
And then working with him so many years later, it all came full circle. But yeah, he was the first name guy I ever met. Like I saw out in public. Like it was just a total random meeting.
And so how was it like? What was it like working with him? Because I mean, his public persona was that he was a completely unstable person. But I think you could speak to probably a little bit different.
A lot of it was a gimmick. A lot of it was when he would get jacked up on stuff. Whether it was the Molson beer or whatever else, all his the A to the Z to the medicine and everything he was doing. I was there the night when he threw a beer bottle at Eric Sims, and we all had a duck, so we didn't get the beer bottle thrown at our head. We got kicked out of the bar. He wound up going home with someone else because it was me and my wife, Leilani Kai, Eric, and Sheik in his car, all like cramped in there, and we wound up going home without Sheik because he went with someone else because they got in a big fight. But no, he got riled up by a couple people and threw a beer bottle at him.
Oh my
It's
God.
stuff of legend. It's stuff of legend.
It's interesting because I remember when I was one of the Wrestle Cons or something. I remember I borrowed someone's vendor table to sell like action figures just to get rid of them, and they just stuck me next to Sheik, who was at the table. And I guess Sheik must have, I don't know what he thought who I was. I literally was just borrowing a vendor table from someone, but he must have thought I was like at least someone who was not a total peon. And so he was sticking it up hard for the fans. I'll bend you over, whatever, doing all these things, screaming at them. And then he like pulled me to the side and was like, how you doing? I'm Cosgrove. And it was like he kind of flipped off this switch of his, and I was like completely taken aback by it. I was like, oh man, this whole thing he's kayfabing, It was like one of the coolest experiences of my life,
And he used to call James. He used to call him Jimmy, Bubba. He used to call everyone Bubba.
Well, yeah, I mean, Bubba is
big T.
That's Arabic. It's Arabic for dad, Papa.
Yeah.
So
big T. I was Big T, and it was James was Jimmy Bubba.
So those guys, I mean, any other like cuckoo kind of stuff like that?
Not off the top of my head. I mean, I have some good ECW stories that I can't really share from back when I was doing the ECW arena shows and going back to the hotels afterwards. Some crazy stuff happened. All that stuff you hear about and you think that can never happen. Trust me, it happened.
It was ECW.
I was there. I was there
right?
for the Todd is God story with Too Cold Scorpio. It happened.
Oh my God!
Wow. You could look it up. You could look it up. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but
no, I'm not.
No.
So I will look it up.
It's not appropriate for this podcast.
So the first ring roast with Sheik was a success. Sheik got it. It was cool. So then the second one was Who?
Was it Terry Funk? Because we did Terry Funk and we did Jim Cornette.
Yeah, I think it was Terry Funk.
Yeah.
So
that one got lost. That one, I think it got a little bit lost. It was more, what could you say bad about Terry Funk?
That's the problem. Is true. Everyone.
Sheik was a cartoon of himself. I mean, you could totally like rib him and make fun of him, and and it was true. What do you say about Terry Funk?
Yeah, beyond all the retirements, which I mean, he's not the only one that's had a lot of retirements. It's like nothing. He was like the sweetest guy in the world.
Right, and the problem is in a show like that, there wouldn't be anyone who would dare to really touch the interesting stuff, like with his wife and stuff like that. They wouldn't. So,
no.
Like, his family, so they wouldn't go crazy. So it was, I guess it was kind of like that. And then Cornette, Cornette's Cornette. So I guess to me, Cornette is one of the most misunderstood people in the business. But
he is. The other one that's real misunderstood, and he just kind of came out since he came back to WWE, is CM Punk. He's another one that's totally misunderstood.
What makes you say that?
Just because, his little stint in AEW and just the way he's acting now in WWE, I think he kind of gets it. He might have thought AEW was kind of a joke, and it may just have been a stepping stone to prove he still had something to come back. And that whole thing could have been a work. Who the hell knows?
It is weird, the whole thing, how, especially since now they all hide behind these NDAs, like they can't talk about it, so you don't even really know. I mean, I'm sure we'll hear some version of a story at some point in the future, but I don't think now is that time.
No, he's a model employee now, though.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's like that's why I have a different respect for him than I did before, because he seemed like he's really giving it his all and being very sincere. I don't know if that's the people he's around that are like influence that he feels very comfortable with them or whatever. Who knows?
I always thought part of his shtick though was that he was like a true believer, whatever that means, and so like he really had a hard time with people who like I know he always had fights with like Shawn Michaels and stuff like that, who were like people who were not the most nice, I guess, or at least decent to others,
Mm-hmm.
But I don't really know. It's hard to get in some. All I know is that CM Punk had a reputation for being like brutally nasty to fans, and to be honest, he's still not great with fans. That's a whole other thing. But I mean, he's fine. He's certainly.
I've never met him. I've never met him. I've never been around him. I've never met him.
He's overly formal in a kind of a strange way for a wrestler, especially when you see. I mean, you've worked with Hulk a few times. You see the way Hulk is able to like manage fans one-on-one, where he makes you think you're the most important person in the world. How he does that, and he's just really, really skilled at it. And some of these people are just really skilled at managing fans. He's just not good at it. And so you see like people, or it's I guess one sort of awkward interaction after another. But I don't think that matters in the grand scheme of things. It's just an interesting observation that he's sort of awkward. But that's he's not the only one, that's for sure. And then so what made you guys stop the ring roasts?
They just weren't producing.
So in terms of ticket sales, or in terms of
ticket sales, and the whole concept was like I don't think it was resonating on people the way it was supposed to. They didn't understand the concept. It's like they thought, you're making fun of the talent. Why are we going to come and watch people make fun of our heroes? So they didn't get the whole concept of the roast.
I also think at that time there were so many. The market was so flooded with like these shoot kind of things, interviews and things, that it's really hard to differentiate and distinguish yourself from what everyone else was doing. Even though the roasts were different from the various shoot interviews that were being done. At some point, people can only spend so much money on this kind of stuff. Like how do you differentiate? I imagine that's look, Sean Oliver went to podcasting instead.
He's with Nash now.
Yeah.
Yep.
Which I'm not gonna lie, I know there are people who are fans of that format and that show. I can't stand it. Now, Dana, you like it. I can't stand it.
I've
never heard it.
Far behind, but I mean, when I listened, I thought it was pretty damn good.
So I like both of them. I think both of them work well together. And Sean's an excellent interviewer.
It's too. There's something about it where it's like almost too informal, and it is. I don't know. That's just my taste, I guess. And so it's I don't know. I just find it to be too informal, and it's not like interesting to me.
Yeah, I think that's honestly what most people like about it, that they feel like it's just two guys and then, they're part of that just bullshitting in like a bar. Like that's the way I think that's what most people love about it. And that's not, that's what you don't love about it.
Yeah, I don't. Well, especially because part of it is like, I have a certain aversion to people who are not in the wrestling business, who talk to wrestlers as if they are in the wrestling business. It just grates on my nerves in a way that's hard to articulate.
And use the jargon and everything else and try to talk in the terms. Yeah. Call them by their real name. It's like whatever they introduce themselves as to you is what you call them.
Pretty much. Exactly. And there's something about it. I probably should just get over it, but it's just not for me. That's all I can say. But I mean, he certainly, I know Sean has made a whole career out of doing all that. So, good for him. So then what, I guess, I don't think we touched on exactly this. So you ran a couple of these Legends of the Ring shows without the super ticket model, I guess a a la carte only kind of format, and then you stopped running them at all. And it was really just a matter of the fact that you guys could do better at home than you could at a con.
Pretty much. I mean, it was so much work. You got to go out there, you got to promote. You got 15 different talents you got to worry about. I mean, after a while, it's like, how much is your time worth? I mean, back in the day, it was a little different because we knew what we were getting into. And then after COVID, it's the great unknown. You don't know what it's going to draw.
Right. So I guess all your old sort of metrics for how you can calculate whether someone was a draw.
All out the window.
So all that knowledge that you had acquired, that experience, became less valuable.
Pretty much, because you had to do a totally different format. And then it's just, my eyes got open when you went from the second to the last show having your highest attendance in the whole entire history of Legends of the Ring to going to the next show and having your lowest attendance rather. So that's
right. And you couldn't even figure out why that happened, right?
No,
because it may have been factors beyond your control, really.
It's like you can't even say lack of advertising. I always use the whole philosophy: if you build it, they will come, from Field of Dreams. But they didn't always come. But what is depend on your roster that day. I think a lot of that had to do with it too.
Stay tuned next week for the second part of our interview with Terence Brennan from Legends of the Ring. If you like what you hear, please subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, or Apple Podcast, and please leave a rating or review on. You can leave a rating on Spotify or Apple Podcast. You can leave a review on Apple Podcast. You can leave thumbs up or thumbs down on YouTube, or you can leave comments on our YouTube videos. All engagement helps us out. So what's coming up for us in the upcoming weeks? We have a private signing with Konosuke Takeshita and Yuka Sakazaki from AEW. They're apparently a couple.
Yeah, I believe they're married.
So there you go. So if you want items or orders for either of those two, all orders are due December 7th. We're not taking any mail orders on those because time is short, but we do have beautiful prints available on our website. So that's it for us this week. So for markedout.com, Marked Out Radio, and Marked Out Collectibles, I'm Sean.
And I'm Dana.
And we'll see you next week for part 2 with Terence.